I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, I'm Rachel Goodman, and we're here for another episode of Narcos Mexico. We're talking Season 2, Episode 2, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about, from interrogations to unions that might be split. But joining me today, we have Rob, our filmmaker and expert Narcos.
Yeah.
And we've got Elizabeth, our Spanglish expert.
¿Cómo están todos? Hey.
Thank you. I do not know what that means. I'm sorry.
It means, hey, what's up?
Cool. Okay.
How are you?
Cool. Well, good to know. Thank you. And stay tuned until the end, because we have two special segments, including our real life Narcos. And we're also going to do a news segment, as well, we have three segments. I lied. We're also going to do predictions at the very end. So let's dive right in. Overall thoughts on this crazy episode.
I liked it. I like the fact that they went a little gorier, and when I say gorier, I mean in the sense of like the grittiness of what is Narcos. Last time we had a little bit broad strokes, and now we're starting to paint pictures and get all the details, and I'm loving where it's going.
Yes, I actually loved how, I know I hate to say that, I loved how they tortured Verdin. I'm just kidding. But they finally got the information out of him, and I was just kind of glad to see that. I wasn't glad to see the way that they just dropped his body off at the hospital, because I was like, this is going to go left, this is going to go left.
So stupid.
So, yeah, so far I like that. And Felix, trying to venture onto more, people to distribute his weed and cocaine. So that's going to get really surprising at the end.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I'm with you guys. I definitely enjoyed that torture scene, which is terrible to say, but what really kept me there is just remembering Kiki and remembering what they did to him. And then, if you didn't remember, they also showed you flashbacks and showed what Verdin did to this poor man. And so it's like, yeah, no, get this guy. And I think what also, like, okay, the thing with Verdin is that he was egging on Breslin from the start, like, oh, I'm going to take control of this interrogation room. Mm-hmm. You're not going to win. I'm not going to tell you anything. It made me want to see him, like, actually get this guy to open up and talk.
Yeah, and I actually thought that he wasn't going to give in, and until the Mexican-American DEA finally shot him, which it kind of put, like, a lot of just, how to explain it, like, for a Mexican American, say as myself, it's hard to be in the position of, are you for Team USA or are you for Team Mexico, because of your roots? Yeah. So the fact that Verdin questioned him and asked him, like, do you really think that the Americans are going to have your back after all this is done? And that's when he pretty much triggered him to finally, like, be like, you know what, let me get this done, shot him, got answers out of him. And then that's when I was like, whoa, like he it's like he turned against his own people, but at the same time, like, who do you work for? Yeah. Who are you loyal to? So a lot of feelings there.
And it was interesting because Dineo, I believe his name was, the guy who ended up shooting Verdin. It was a very interesting moment that they kind of played it out in a way that while we're seeing their interaction, we also got the narrative. And that's what I love about this show, is that they always fill us in with certain things. And we got the narrative of the fact that the way that Americans tortured people was actually brought to Latin America.
Yes.
And that is why it even evolved the way that it did, was because that Americans
created.
And so on top of that, on top of the Americans bringing this to Latin America, people of Latin America also learned how to resist this and how to evolve and how to get past being treated this way.
Yeah, and one thing back to with the torture and with what was his name that shot
Dineo.
That shot Verdin. When he shot him, it kind of reminded me of, like, a couple movies I've seen, but one movie in particular is The Untouchables.
Yeah.
And where Sean Connery tells Elliot Ness, we have to
Elliot
do
Ness.
this the Chicago way. And that's kind of what this character was doing when he shot him, because they have ways of doing things in America, but this is Mexico. It's kind of like that old saying, when in Rome, act as the Romans would. And once he shot him, then he started cooperating. But part of me is wondering if Verdin is so smart that he did that just so he could give them a name and then be free and then be able to execute revenge on these guys. I was really thinking about this because this guy is super smart. He was trained in this way.
Well, and one of the things Verdin actually said was, one day this is going to be reversed. And when I see you, I'm going to actually make you scream about things you care about. Your kids. You're going to be yelling for your mother and your father. I felt like that was a very, obviously a threat, but I think that, this is a little prediction, but I'm just going to say it since we're talking about this.
Yeah.
It feels like this dialogue was used specifically to foreshadow the fact that this guy, Verdin, is going to live. Like, obviously, they dropped him off at the hospital at the end. He's going to live, and there's going to be a moment where he comes for revenge because now you've pissed off a giant.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel bad for Breslin and Dineo because when this role is reversed, they are done.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's a giant with a lot of friends too, and it doesn't. At this point, I don't think it matters that they're Americans because they're in Mexico, and it's a whole set of rules. Once they kidnapped, a federal official. I think that changed all the rules of the game.
And we saw, we'll talk about this in a second, but with Don Juan, we saw that even in Mexico, there are people who have friends with cops.
Yes.
And so I feel like Breslin's in a really dangerous place now because he has just, this move, I think, is going to cost him. And it's, this whole interrogation scene was just so well done. I loved the fact that, typically you see somebody come in, and even if they don't crack, and even if they give someone a hard time, the difference with Verdin is that I was scared of him. And he didn't have any power, but the way that he commanded the room in his dialogue and his presence,
yes.
I was scared of him, and he didn't have a weapon, and I didn't think he was going to jump up and do anything. I was just scared of him and scared for Breslin.
Yes. I think that's some great directing and great writing. Just the way everything is revealed, in the beginning, about how he knows how long he's there and how the directions that they took to get there, no detours. These are intricate details that only the people executing the kidnapping would know. And for him to know that, that's a testament to who his character is and how trained he is.
And that's one of the things he said in the very beginning is that he had the power because he already knew everything. He knew how he believed he knew how it was going to play out. And so for him, I could just feel Breslin's fear.
Yeah.
He was not, everything about this was very sloppy.
The thing, too, though, is that he's speaking in such confidence that he's like, oh, this is what's going to happen. But then again, as you're watching the episode, you're seeing Felix's people, slowly, destroy this group, this family that they built, because El Chapo is, now throwing jabs at Benjamin, and you're creating a little war there. So now it's okay, now it's a cartel war and a drug war going on, or at least it's building up to it, So I'm excited to see how that's going to play out and what the writers are going to do to, include such great, moments that actually did happen.
Absolutely. And, I agree with you. And this is probably a wonderful time to transition and talk a little bit about Benjamin. Before we do, though, I just want to thank everybody who's watching at home. Thank you for making us the ESPN of TV Talk. We are always so thankful that you are here supporting us, liking all of our videos, commenting on our videos. We'll go back. This is not a live taping, but we will go back, and if you do leave any comments on either the first two episodes of Narcos Season 2, then we will go back and we can read them when we are live, or, once these videos do go live, we'll look, and then next time we're taping, we'll be able to go back and read them. But thank you again so much, and just, every time you subscribe to our channels, it helps supports us and helps us grow. So thank you again so much for being the best part of AfterBuzz TV. And with that very
like a nice little
yeah, and with that very like somber melody,
Yeah.
let's talk about some drugs.
drugs, man.
So let's talk about Benjamin in Tijuana. First of all, so we were so excited to talk about this that we were actually talking before we started recording. And Rob, we were talking about crack and how
Yes.
How the hell of a drug?
I've never done crack. Never.
But for anyone who's watching along, we were talking about how that's kind of how we see Benjamin. We see him in Tijuana. We see him discovering crack for the first time, and how obviously they take cocaine, and how you burn it, and how you smoke it, and that it's crackling, and that's why they have the name crack.
Yes.
And I was so like excited to see Quavo make a guest appearance, and I know he was too.
I couldn't
like,
believe
Quavo's
it.
coming up,
He's done very well for himself.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of looked the same as I was telling him. I was like, he looks just about the same that he like looks right now. So
Right.
I was like, is this really how they dressed in the 80s?
I mean, if you're making money like they were in the 80s, and
It's a lot of gold.
I think, I like how with the whole thing with introducing crack in the show. I mean, at this point in the season, this is 1985.
Yeah.
And this is at the height of the crack, well, the beginning of the crack epidemic in America. And I loved how, he explained the potential for these people to make a lot of money from this. Now, at the time, they were just, moving cocaine. But once you discover that there's a whole new market, for your cocaine and how it can be turned into something else, I think that could tempt a man like Benjamin, who has a lot of ambition and a lot of this complex, he's not being paid attention to so much or taken seriously. So
And
I think this will work.
It's interesting, too, because the big draw to this is that instead of spending so much money, you could sell smaller bits of it for a cheaper amount of money. And that basically it was a more economic way for them to make even more money.
Mm-hmm.
And they made the analogy of you don't necessarily need to sell Cadillac to make money. You can sell Toyota as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the reference I was about to
Yeah.
say. I was like, I liked how they referenced it to that.
Yeah. And but at the same time, there was this like foreboding, like as I'm seeing Benjamin get like wrapped up in this, I am just, I'm just getting worried that, this is breaking all kinds of, deals that everything with Felix, I mean,
Yes,
everything with Felix, like we're seeing, obviously we're seeing that separately right now, but everything we're seeing with Benjamin, you poor Benjamin. I feel like this is all going to come down on him.
Yeah.
And then you see his brother, what's his name? The one that
Ramon, I believe,
Yes.
right?
Ramon.
it's like he didn't follow the rules, like when Quavo said, don't get high off your own supply,
Right.
like referencing it to
Scarface,
Scarface. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's sad to see that he already got hooked on it, because now he's gonna definitely be acting out, and I don't think he's gonna take responsibility towards the plaza that they control, and
Exactly.
especially with El Chapo, interfering and like just sabotaging them. I feel like things are just gonna get worse.
Well, the thing with crack too, and I only know this because unfortunately we all have people
don't
we
lie.
know. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I had a friend who had a problem, and the thing with crack, obviously all drugs are addictive in some way, but with crack, it's just that you take one hit, and it's apparently like you can become addicted right off the bat because of the way that it makes you feel, and it only lasts for like not even that long. So the problem is that people getting wrapped up in this, like Ramon, my fear is that he's going to keep needing more and more because it does not last that long. And so I just see this, I see this poor kid, like to me he's a kid, he's could be my age, I don't know, but like he looks like a kid to me, and I just feel so bad for him that he's getting wrapped up in all of this.
And I think also, from what I've been told about crack, is that the first time that you smoke crack will be the best high that you'll get, and from there on, your body will try to chase that first time. And so, seeing how Ramon enjoyed that from the beginning, I was like, this guy, he is going to be the fall of the empire here, because that first hit, and he's like, oh, bring some more of that stuff. that guy is going to be chasing that first time he had that hit. He's always going to remember that time where he met those Americans and did that crack. And I have a feeling that it's going to spread because Ramon is young and doesn't have, you know, the self-restraint as the other seasoned individuals in his circle. And yeah.
And he's not even as important either.
Exactly.
And, so he's like, he might as well be wearing a red shirt. But so let's talk a little bit more about Benjamin, because we are seeing a lot more with the Sinaloans and this rivalry. And like we got this whole with I know I'm going to butcher this, but with Coche Loco.
You said it good.
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, good. So with him, and you know them sending the crazy pig. I felt bad for the pig. I hate when I see animals.
He's all like, they're gonna cook it up right
They're
after.
going to eat that pig.
Carnitas, you know.
I mean, hearing the poor pig wail, I was like, okay, please don't.
I was
Like,
like, Peter's gonna be so mad at this episode. I was like, this is so sad.
yeah, poor thing. And like, but like the play on his name, Crazy Pig, and like just sending this, and it just again, like it reminded me of Godfather, and you know, like with the horse, except this was a pig, and maybe not a bloody pig until they shot him. But yeah.
You know what I've been noticing too, that like, okay, you have these American movies, you know, like The Godfather, Scarface, Goodfellas, but you never have had like this Mexican, like, you know, Godfather type of like movie. In this case, it's like a TV show series. So I'm just like, whoa. Like, I mean, not to get like shine out there and like, you know, the Hispanics, but it's just almost like, you know, like you guys need to know the history of, you know, the Mexican cartels too, and the way drug lords moved, because it's not just, I mean, yeah, Americans, you know, they created a recipe for it, but they kind of like perfected it, you know? They, like, he was the first to have created this, like, what was he comparing it to, like the Roman Empire?
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool that you finally get to see like this side, whereas like you pretty much have an idea that just El Chapo is like the biggest, you know, drug lord. But to be honest, I didn't even know of Felix Gallardo. I was like, oh, okay, like this is how it started, and that's his like, you know. Well, he was, his successor is now, well, somebody else, like, but El Chapo was his successor. So now that he's locked up, you're just like, you create questions, you know, as a civilian. You're just like, whoa. So, you know, that was pretty kind of cool to watch.
And I also like the way how they show, and this may teeter-totter on the line of glorifying it, but these people at the end of the day, this is just their business, you know, and the way that they go about it is in a business-like manner. And some of the ways that they deal with their rivals or problems that they have around this business are a bit primitive. But at the same time, these people, you get to see like the human aspect of it and like how they conduct themselves. It's not just like Wild Wild West running down the street shooting at whoever for no purpose. You know, there's a purpose behind every bullet in Narcos.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
the only other thing I want to mention about this storyline is that ending that we had where, well, one, Isabella did come back, and I thought about your prediction because it's exactly what you said. I believe it was you, right, Rob?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and so Isabella came back and was talking to Benjamin, so we kind of saw that now she's back and she's trying to work in a deal with Benjamin. Benjamin's trying to figure out a way to remain loyal to Felix while navigating this new world on his own. But then on top of that, we have the Sinaloans, who are obviously going to cause major problems, and they do cause problems. And this, like, they were in a club called the Roxanne, and after all of this, like, we see this really, like, you know, typical 80s scene with 80s music, and then after everything, we end that scene with them fighting each other. And while Felix is off trying to preserve the union and then grow the union and build this bond, it's deteriorating.
Like, you know, meanwhile, you know, Felix is over here trying to create this bigger empire, and yet they're like messing it up. It's like, wow, like it's almost like the guy that he made a deal with, Don Juan, he's gonna feel just like, you know, regretful about this decision. I don't think it's I
just think it's a problem with the Sinaloans, and due to them coming up with Felix, they kind of feel like they could do whatever they want, it seems like. And then you have, Benjamin and his family, they're fighting for every inch, in the war of attrition with drugs and territory. And I think a really important thing, because you brought up Isabella and Benjamin, having the conversation, and for her to try to woo Benjamin away to go out and do business behind Felix's back, that's still with Benjamin saying no and telling her to leave the way she came, that shows that Benjamin's character still has discipline and still wants to preserve the relationship he have, because at the end of the day, he still wants to make as much money and, bring as much happiness to his family and territory as he can. And he can't do that if he's doing business with Isabella.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you had mentioned Don Juan again as well. So let's shift a little bit and let's talk about what was happening over there, because I did not think that Don Juan was going to agree to do business with
Same.
Felix. It feels like everybody who is kind of on the outside, who has not joined this family, or not family, but I guess the union that Felix is trying to create, everybody is very cautious about Felix. And, understandably so, but they're cautious. And I am very concerned about Don Juan, because I feel like he is not officially, he's given his word, but I felt a little bit of a flakiness to that word.
I feel like I agree with you. I feel like there could be some sort of flakiness, but I think it's due to Don Juan knowing everything that comes with working with Felix, just from the circles that he hangs with, and then also all the drama that has come behind him and what Felix has done to get to this point. And I think there's a real important conversation that they had whenever there's the big monologue with Felix speaking with Don Juan about what he wants to do. And when Don Juan says to him, I'm glad you showed me who, that's the person, you showed me the person that I wanted to see, because Don Juan showed him who he really was, yet Felix was holding back, trying to be a certain way to convince Don Juan, and it wasn't working until he showed him the real him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved that moment. I feel like Don Juan wouldn't have just agreed to this meeting with Felix unless he was entertaining the idea in some capacity.
Or even showed him around, the whole field he has, the river. I was like, whoa, this is definitely gonna get cocaine moving faster.
And I love how in that moment we learned a little bit about Don Juan, that he had been doing this since the 20s. He referenced Prohibition in America, and that how it had gone from Prohibition all the way up to people, and then it went to opiates. And obviously we know, even now in 2020, we're dealing with an opiate crisis.
And I liked how he also just pointed out who the consumers were in America, and how to this day it's the same consumers. So if anything, it's a consumer problem and the drug lord problem at this point. So it's sad to know that so many people in the world rely on drugs to ease off of whatever is going on in their lives. So that's pretty sad to know it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
It's also sad to know that all these politicians and policemen and government officials that have watched this happen for years. I mean, just think about someone like Don Juan has been moving stuff across since 1926. That is generations of people who knew about this.
And that obviously drugs are money, and money pays to get you what you want to do. I feel like, even if we look now, there's certain things, money will pretty much get people to turn a blind eye. And so it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter what, the illegal activities with drugs going on. Certain people will just not even, look, not even really care. If the price is right. And so, but speaking of, people being in with politicians, we had a lot going on with Amato when he was looking for Acosta, and when he finally finds him, he's with Mimi in Texas.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved Mimi. She was so cool.
Yeah, and I thought I recognized the actress. I want to Google it before I say who I think it was, but she looked very familiar, Mimi.
Yeah. And I liked how the writers made sure to include with her dialogue that when what's his name asked her for a drink, And she's like, you could get it yourself. And I was like, yeah, like there's like a huge difference with like American cultures versus Mexican culture. Because Mexican culture, like the woman's supposed to do everything without even asking or like, you know, denying. Whereas like the American culture, it's like, you know, woman empowerment. I mean, it did lead, you know, it had to get, you know, it had to grow to that. But at the same time, it's like during the 1980s, I'm pretty sure women were more vocal and were able to do more things. So I think that's what's cool, that like you can see, and when she had the gun out and everything, she wasn't afraid, like, you know. So it's almost like I like how they portrayed the American woman versus the Hispanic woman, you know. And like even with Bella, like you could see that she got turned down with Benjamin, and he was like, the reason he didn't kill you because you were just nothing to him. So that's what hurt. Like as a Hispanic woman, I was like, whoa, like to know that there's a woman still suffering against like toxic masculinity, that's pretty saddening. Yeah.
And I like what you said too about seeing the difference, especially with Mimi. Not only is she an American woman, but she's a Texan American woman. And I was a history major in college, and I just remember everything we learned about Texas and how people like were always basically like rebels in their own right. And so I feel like, you know, like 1980s, like we were still, you know, America was still dealing with women's rights and like what, you know, like women's liberation and like everything in terms of, you know, equal treatment. But I feel like in Texas, of all places, Mimi was probably more free to be the way she was.
Yeah, because don't you have like the right to bear arms?
Yeah.
Like I mean, I've never gone to Texas. Well, besides El Paso.
Yeah.
So
been to Dallas, but that's not. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've heard they all carry, you know, on them. So I was like, oh, like this really is
a lot
real.
of people carry it in Texas.
Wild West. So yeah. Okay. So before we get to our special segment, let's just touch really fast about Don Juan. We were talking a little bit about him, but the only other thing I really wanted to mention and call back to was this. Elizabeth, you were kind of talking about Don Juan finally saying that their conversation pulled the real Felix out. So I just want to touch a little bit more on that and get your last thoughts on without getting too prediction-y, just your last thoughts on like how you see this going for him.
For Don Juan?
Yeah.
I feel like his family will get threatened, maybe. I can see somebody important to him probably dying.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I think might happen. And you, like, when he was talking to Felix, he was like, I don't want to risk, you know, what you've risked. He's like, because you don't even have your men. He's all like, you have more enemies than you do family. He's all like, and he's like, look around me. All I have is, like, family. And it was pretty cool, too, how, like, when they did shake hands, he's all like, my family is now your family. So I just, I feel like somehow Felix's people or Felix will turn on him when time needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how about like your prediction?
Oh, well, I think Don Juan is going to keep an eye on this whole situation. And I think when Don Juan sees the point where he has to cut Felix off, he will.
Yeah.
But when he does, I think it's going to come at a price for him. I think somehow he's going to get wrapped up in it, and he's going to possibly either go down or be killed, or someone very important to him, like you saying, could possibly be killed. But I do think Don Juan is wise enough to have some foresight on this and see when he has to get out.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to our segments. Our first segment we're going to touch on is our news segment.
AfterBuzz TV News.
So Elizabeth, go ahead and take it away.
All right, so far for news, I was looking into Diego Luna's Instagram, and it's kind of cool to see that behind scenes, he's actually helping instead of drug trafficking. So he's, right, it's almost like it's a different person. Who is he? So in real life, he's actually helping with a cause in Mexico, and it was called Voces contra Poder, which basically means voices against the power. And usually we all know, like, you know, in Mexico, there's so much corruption in the government, and they're fighting to voice all the people that are that are hurt, and currently, you know, even like the 43 students that went missing like 5 years ago, they're fighting for that. They're fighting for women getting raped and tortured. They're fighting for people just dying off the cartel alone. What is it, like 250,000 deaths since, you know, the drug war? So it's pretty cool that he's taking his actor role very serious behind scenes, where he's actually helping, you know, stop all this corruption. So that's what I saw. He was with a lot of actors, and they were all, you know, joined forces so they can, you know, fight this cause.
Awesome.
Which is pretty cool to do in Mexico, because it's hard to voice your opinion in Mexico. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So our next segment is going to be our real life Narcos. And for this, we're actually calling back to the original. I love that sound effect. We're actually calling back to the original show Narcos. For anyone who's not familiar, so Narcos was on for 2 seasons, set in Colombia. It was based upon Pablo Escobar. And so the real guy, just to talk about him, since we're gonna, you know, talk about the real life people, he was a Colombian drug lord who founded and was the sole leader of the Medellin cartel. He was dubbed the King of Cocaine and is known as the wealthiest criminal in history. So of course they would want to do Narcos based around him. The other thing is that he amassed an estimated net worth of $30 billion by the time of his death, equivalent to $59 billion as of 2019, while his drug cartel monopolized the cocaine trade in the U.S. in the 80s and 90s. So just wanted to give a, you know, shout out to that guy then.
History lesson there.
Yeah.
Something I didn't know.
Let's go ahead and get to our predictions.
Your AfterBuzz TV prediction.
Elizabeth, would you like to start?
I feel like, again, with Isabella, I love going back to her. I feel like she's going to retaliate, and she's definitely going to get some power and a seat in the table. If anything, she's going to probably get men to go against Benjamin and Felix, because I feel like now it's like, okay, you did me wrong once, now twice, there's no third time. So I feel like she's out for vengeance too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, and they gave her such a small part too in this episode that I feel like, no, she's gonna keep being, you know, in there.
Yeah, and Rob, how about you?
I think there's going to be a fight between the guys from Sinaloa and the guys from Tijuana. I think there's going to be a big showdown with them, resulting in numerous deaths. And I think Ramon is going to get hooked on crack really badly. And lastly, I think that once again, Don Juan and, well, actually, I can skip Don Juan. I'll talk about Breslin. I think Breslin letting, what was his name again?
Vendir.
Yeah, letting him go, that's going to come back to bite him in the butt.
Yeah, that's my biggest prediction right now, is that this whole interrogation moment, I would never want, you know, somebody to basically do that to, like the way that they were treating Vendir. Mm-hmm. I would never want someone to torture another person, but my fear is that Vendir being alive is going to be Breslin and or, you know, anyone else in the crew. I think it's going to be their death sentence, ultimately, because this guy is going to come back. He's alive. Like, there's no way that he's not alive. And he's going to come back with a vengeance, number one. Also, I think that the situation between Tijuana and the Sinaloans, I think that's going to escalate and cause all kinds of problems, but I still keep feeling like Felix I feel like this is all, I feel like at first I said last episode that this might be his downfall, but now I'm starting to think that maybe he's going to somehow get around this and use the way that the Sinaloans are acting to his advantage and be able to somehow unite everybody else. So, all right, well, any other final thoughts on this episode before we conclude?
One final thought. This one, I do love the way that it looks, like color-wise, and how they use different colors to show different points in different people's lives, and also in different scenes. For example, the dark, gritty world of the torture scene versus the crazy party world inside the club and all the characters. And then also we have, I think the writing has gotten even greater this episode. Once again, I know we talked about the whole conversation between Don Juan and Felix. Like the power dynamic shift whenever Felix explained, what he really wanted, and I thought that was a great moment, and I think we're gonna come back to that again at some point, another conversation like that.
And did you have any final thoughts?
I'm just so excited to see Quavo in there. I think that I hate to say that's what excited me the most. So I think my final thought would be, good job on the producers on that part.
Awesome,
Yeah.
great. Well, I think that wraps up our show. Elizabeth, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Instagram on I messed up that one up. California. So yes, come at me.
And Rob, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Rob Stilo. That's STEELO.
Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at Rach Goodman or on my Instagram account at Rachel Radner Author. If you are a fan of Stumptown, Doctor Who, The Young and the Restless, or Outlander, I'm also on those after shows as well. Until next time, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.